Good evening. Good evening, everyone, and I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Town Council of the Town of Clarkdale for Tuesday, September 9th, 2025 at 6 p.m. in the Clark Memorial Clubhouse. Roll call, Vice Mayor Hunsetter. Here. Councilmember Babette Pierce. She's absent tonight. Councilmember O'Neill. Here. Councilmember Jones. And please note that Mayor Bauer is here. We have a quorum. Item 3 on the agenda is the Town Council invites the public to provide comments at this time. Members of the Town Council may not discuss items that are not specifically identified on the agenda. Therefore, action taken as a result of public comment will be limited to directing staff to study the matter, responding to any criticism, or scheduling the matter for further consideration and decision at a later time. If you're interested in making a comment on a specific item on the agenda, please keep those comments until that agenda item. And we ask that you fill out a brief form to submit for me to know who's in the audience then. Each speaker is asked to limit their comments to 3 minutes unless a different amount of time is noted on the agenda or is determined by the presiding officer or by a majority vote of the council. So at this moment, does anybody wish to make a public comment? And if you're online and want to make a public comment, just put a note in the chat and our town clerk will let you in. Anybody wish to make public comment? Okay. Yes, please come up and state your name and if you're a Clarkdale resident.
I didn't fill out the form, but
That's okay, Jean. You don't have
I'm Jeannie Baird from Lower Town, Clarkdale. I've got to tell you what a success the park is. I talked to Joni, and at 7:30 in the morning, she sees people. At 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock in the morning, the park is filled. And after school, the kids are all over. And I've seen parents on swings. I've seen people walking their dogs through there. It's absolutely a joy to this community. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Jeannie. Anybody else wish to make public comment? Before we close public comment, and this is my point of privilege at the moment to do this, is I would like Joni Westcott to please come up to the podium over here. Oh, do we? Okay. That wishes to make public comment? Okay, hold Joni. Please, Okay. Nathan, you wish to speak, just state your name if you're a Clarkdale resident and go forward. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, I'm Nathan Porter. I live in Mountain Gate. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Nathan Porter. I live in Clarkdale. I'm a resident of Mountain Gate. And I'm talking to you because you probably saw the newspaper headline that said, Clarkdale rejects Mountain Gate. And I was sad to see that. I'm not on the Mountain Gate HOA board. I know the members on the board. I go to their meetings and I volunteer to help the HOA. And I'm sad that no one from the HOA was present in your meeting in August when you discussed the trails in Mountain Gate. And it's correct that there's no parking or trailheads for the trails in Mountain Gate. I'm wondering if that was actually part of the agreement with the developer, if he was actually required to do that. There is pedestrian access to trails in Mountain Gate. There's a path that leads from Malachite Drive in Mountain Gate to Clarkdale Parkway. And there's also access on Centerville Road up to Centerville or down Centerville to Broadway. I mean, some of us actually walk from Mountain Gate into downtown and we have access that way.
Okay.
I mean, me and other residents of the town don't want to see the town just abandon the trails in Mountain Gate. The residents in Mountain Gate are citizens of Clarkdale and we're taxpayers. and we think that we deserve services from the town just like any other development would. And from the meeting in August, it wasn't clear to me if there had been any communication between the town and the Mountain Gate HOA board. It appears that there wasn't. The town didn't seem to have a lot of information about what was going on with the trails and what were the access to the trails. I'm just asking the council to please don't abandon the trails at Mountain Gate. Don't abandon the residents of Mountain Gate. And I'm asking you to communicate with the Mountain Gate HOA board and try to work out this trail situation. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Nathan. And I think if our town manager has the information and we can communicate some stuff to you later. With that, let's move on. Joni, please come up. If there's no other person who wants to make a public comment, okay. Joni, I'm sorry. This is kind of our point of privilege from the council. I was asked that I think there are some council members who wish to talk to you for a moment in public, but I will start off by saying the park is yours. You were the one who led it. You were the one who brought it all together. Don't shake your head, my friend. But it is a shining star in a shining gem in the valley, and the compliments just keep on flowing in. The community did remarkable work in pulling together all the great elements to this park, and you and your team in Parks and Recreation and the commission all pulled it all together and made it happen. And it was your leadership that really brought it to a conclusion. So I want to say my heartfelt thank you for bringing this magnificent park forward for all of us in Clarkdale.
Thank you.
And I'm going to yield to my other council members on this.
It's fabulous. I was there again last night. Every time I go by, there are people, and it was wonderful to be there with the community and see how you all really brought the whole community together and really did something that I think if you had said, we're going to do that, I think it was, people were skeptical. Could we really do this? Could this really be achieved? And I know Susan's been incredibly instrumental in that, and your team, which is a very tiny team, but all your volunteers, it's just amazing. And it's just an incredible contribution to the community. So thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, well, since I live in the neighborhood, I am very, very partisan, but one of my neighbors said, I don't know why we need all this kid stuff. We don't have any kids here. Apparently we're importing them because that park is busy day and night. It's not late at night, but it's lovely. And we so appreciate, we know how hard it was. We don't know how hard it was. You know how hard it was, but we appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I also wish to extend my thanks. I mean, it is amazing. And I remember sitting over there in the other building when it was first presented by Parks and Rec, 6 years ago, something like that. The concept, and it's like, wow, it's like, yes, we want this now, but it took a long journey to get there. And what you have created is just such a sense of community, and having everyone there for the grand opening. Everyone was happy and joyful, and the kids flying the kites. I mean, it was, and then all the comments on social media, it's just widespread, and people are like, oh, we've got to go. So thank you for, when I was talking to the artist that was painting the bike rack into the snake, Vincent, he was saying he was born here, and this is the biggest thing that has ever happened in this town. So thank you for everything that you and your team did to accomplish this.
Thank you. Couldn't have done it without your support. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that point of privilege. And let's move on to item 4, which is reports. Current events in the packet were summary of current events of the mayor, vice mayor, and council members for all of you to read. They are online. Let's move on to organizational reports. Those, if there were reports, they would have been either passed along to you or they were in our packets. I think most of them, if there are any. So let's start with VVTPO, Verde Valley Transportation Planning Organization. I think she's gone, but Town Manager Guthrie, do you have anything from VVTPO?
2 weeks. Okay. Yeah. 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks. Okay, no report. NACOG, Northern Arizona Council of Governments.
We did have a meeting on August 28th, and I have submitted both the agenda and meeting materials and the slides that came in later.
Thank you. Northern Arizona Municipal Water Users Association, NAMWA.
There was not a board meeting, but I think on the 15th of August, there was a technical advisory committee meeting and at least one person from Public Works attended.
Thank you. Transportation Policy Advisory Council, again, Councilmember Baba Pierce isn't here, no report. Verde Front Leadership Council doesn't meet until end of October, so no report on that one. Sustaining Flows Committee.
There's a lot of great work being done across the valley around water conservation and that. But one of the things that's happening, and Clarkdale's going to be part of it, is a Verde Watershed legislative tour in October. It's being hosted by the Nature Conservancy and the Audubon Society. And the Clarkdale Water Campus will be part of that tour.
Okay.
And so hopefully it is legislators from across the state that they will be coming here to see what's being done in the valley around water conservation. And we're very excited to be part of that tour and have folks come here and see all the work that we're doing.
Great. Yavapai Communities for Young Children, that's again, Councilmember Babbitt Pierce, she's not here, no report. As with the next one, which is Vulnerable Road Users Emphasis Area Team. So let's go on to NACOG Community Action Board.
We have met. I didn't have anything major to report though.
Okay, thank you. That's all of our organizational reports. Let's move on to consent agenda. There are 2 items on consent this evening. They are approval of our minutes of August 26, 2025. And the second item is an intergovernmental agreement between the town of Clarkdale and Yavapai County Flood Control District. Does anyone want to pull either one of these items for discussion? Okay, seeing nobody wanting to pull either one, I will take a motion to approve consent agenda.
I'll move that we approve consent agenda items A and B as written.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved by Vice Mayor Hunstetter and second by Councilmember O'Neill to approve consent agenda item A and B as presented. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carried. Okay, let's move on to new business. First item on 6A, Town of Clarkdale's Housing Needs Assessment. We'll be having a presentation on the needs assessment by Martina Kuhl of Kuhl Enterprises. That's correct. Assistant Town Manager Ruth Mayday will introduce Martina and the presentation. There is no action. This is for information only tonight. So thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. We have Martina Kuhl back with us again this evening. As you may recall, the town received a grant for $200,000 to develop a local jurisdiction housing strategy. The first phase of that was a housing needs assessment, which Martina has now completed. You'll notice that we have on the posters out in the lobby, and you'll see throughout the PowerPoint presentation that we have been using the drawings that the students from Clarkdale Jerome schools submitted. And I think they really lend a lot to the document. I'm not going to take up a lot of time here. Martina has been before us before. This is a lot of work, a lot of detail, but it really, I think, sets the stage for where we are and how we can work together to make housing more attainable for more families and households.
Welcome, Martina. Just identify yourself for the record, please.
Martina Keel Enterprises LLC, consultant on the Town of Clarkdale Housing Plan. As Ruth mentioned, we have the boards out here, the data walk, to kind of explain how we got, what led us to the market conditions that we have today. And it also describes a variety of different conditions. Most of these conditions, but not all of them, will kind of float to the surface in an abbreviated plan. The housing needs assessment itself is a fairly lengthy document, so it just kind of becomes a background document for people who want to do more in-depth research. So we will eventually kind of whittle this down to an actual plan with some highlighted data to kind of relate back to the proposed actions that are going to be forthcoming over the next couple of months. So I'm really excited about kind of moving into that next phase. The posters, right now there's a survey that there's a link to it. Apparently the QR code is problematic, but there's a link to it on the board here, and we'll be posting that information so that residents can give us their feedback on the kinds of housing that they think are, okay in the community, and a little bit of background on them. So we understand, some people have never rented, some people have never owned. What kinds of opinions do they have about what's important in the community just based on their background? And so that information will be coupled with these lovely posters that the children drew for us. And so we will actually have posters with messages related to things that residents are telling us is important, so we can get the message out about housing and its relevance in the community for a range of types of households. So that portion of the requirements is almost done. That's kind of our community outreach plan, is the posters. There's also a slide deck that we're working on getting narrated. So that'll be kind of a video kind of thing that people can walk through, that really looks at the information that you see about the workforce members and what they can afford. And, that's a regional kind of thing. It's not necessarily just Clarkdale, but I think it's very relevant to what portion of that need can Clarkdale reasonably meet when you look at what the conditions are. So as I mentioned, I'll be delivering some strategic initiatives coming up over the course of the next couple of months, and that will be turned into an action plan based on your input and additional input from residents, with really the goal of having no more than 5 to 10 strategies that you can reasonably implement. We don't need a tome of strategies. We need meaningful actions to be taking place. So those are the required elements, along with bringing that final plan before you for adoption in order to fulfill the grant requirements from ADO. As part of that, as you know, there's also a code revision taking place that was also funded with this particular grant. So that's kind of running parallel to this, and I have a timeline to share with you. So as I mentioned, we can do the next slide. Thank you. As I mentioned, the community outreach and education piece is well underway. In fact, it's almost entirely completed. So I want to talk a little bit about, we have had a working group to kind of identify what direction we want to take, what we want to communicate with residents about what's important. They've been very helpful. There was an employer and an employee survey done, and I want to share that. In the employee survey, we had 64 Clarkdale members of the workforce respond, which I thought was actually pretty darn good. 60% of them working and living in Clarkdale, and the remainder outside of Clarkdale proper, and a little over half of them own. I think was really interesting to me was that 21 of them were still seeking to purchase or either, upsize or downsize to a different kind of home. And most of them considered housing priced at under $250,000 to be something that they can afford. So we know we're not quite there. There were also 7 who said, I'm seeking to rent. 1 who said, I'll rent anything that I can find, which I think was very important to hear. And then there were actually 4 who said, I live in my RV. I would like to live closer to work, but there's no affordable spaces in Clarkdale. So it just kind of shows the range of what, people who work here are saying would be helpful to them to fully both live and work in the community. So I'm very attentive to the workforce because I think it is indeed probably the biggest challenge, not only in Clarkdale, but of course across the region, is housing for families and housing for working people. So the housing needs assessment itself looks at the recent drivers of housing demand. How did we get here? Everybody knows the last 4 years were pretty crazy. We had a lot of in-migration. In fact, most of the growth in Clarkdale was indeed people who were in-migrating. And those in-migrating households tended to be older, either already retired or nearing retirement. And their average income is over $90,000 a year, which is $20,000 higher than the people who are leaving, and $10,000 higher than the people who are staying. So, it's a fairly significant bump in income. Kind of coupled with that is that households with no earners saw increase in income that was greater than households with even 2 earners. So that percentage wise, not necessarily dollar wise, but from a percentage standpoint. So that is kind of a, fairly significant message. And I think we've been, blessed with many retirees who are, interested and volunteering in the community, but it has kind of changed the, the nature of things over the last 4 years. It is not, again, not necessarily unique to Clarkdale. I'm seeing this in other places as well. There were a lot of property transfers over the last 4 years. About a third of Clarkdale properties transferred. So that's a lot of people moving in and moving out. And about 20% of those were investment and second homes. So, those are homes that aren't necessarily available for people who want to both live and work here. Yes. Correct. Yeah. So about 1/6 of them. So yeah. Yes. Thank you. So kind of, what that has done is, the high demand has, of course, increased prices. And we know this. And what's happened over the course of just that very short period of time is that to now buy like the mid-priced home, which is in the range of, $460,000, if you're a working household, it takes about $175,000 a year in income, which is not necessarily congruent with the wages that are paid in this area. Likewise, when we look at rent, to really be able to afford the median rent for a two-bedroom is about $64,000 a year, which might be closer to workforce wages, particularly if you have, multiple earners. But it kind of means, if you want to live and work here, you can count on renting. It's kind of as the best option. I'm going to talk about current housing needs and some potential solutions as we move through this. But I did want to say that there was an assessment done of how many housing units could be built in Clarkdale. And that was actually part of your general plan, the 969 potential units given current zoning, which is for the most part large lot, single family zoning. And if we have a continued kind of the trend in population and household growth continues, and who knows with the market, what's going to happen, we will see somewhere between 322 and 753 new households between now and 2035. The big shift is going to be that because the housing market is so difficult to enter, is that we're going to see more demand for rental units because, as we grow, we have to grow our workforce in order to accommodate the needs of the people who live here. So we'll see that. But the simple fact that we're already an older community in terms of householders over the age of 65, people who are aging in place, they're moving through kind of the age cohorts. And so that over 65 is going to increase to almost 6 of 10 households over the next 10 years. It's about half now. And that's pretty much true throughout Yavapai County and other attractive retirement destinations. Along with that comes an increase in the number of single people who are age 65 and older, or a little bit younger than that in some cases. And those households are particularly vulnerable to having housing challenges because they may be going from two sources of income, to one source of income. And their options becomes more challenging. And I think that part of that rental demand will be people who they love it here and they want to stay here. But renting just seems like a better option for them. Time will tell. We have to make assumptions about what's going to happen. All in all, households headed by people under the age of 65 are going to have little to no impact on the housing market unless there is some changes made to make it possible for them to enter into home ownership and even into renting if that's what they choose. So that's kind of what the action plan is all about, right? It's all about saying, how can we have a variety of housing? How can we make sure that this is a community for people of all ages and for families with children, so our lovely parks are well utilized well into the future. Next slide, please. So in terms of current housing needs, I didn't bring my reading glasses, so you'll have to forgive me here. I'm going to look at the slide. But right now in 2023, when we look at renters, most of the renters, what we look at when we talk about housing need versus demand is just, people who need housing, they can afford to purchase what's here. The private sector comes in, builds it. Need is about people whose incomes are insufficient to afford the housing that is available. So we tend to look at lower income households, also look at moderate and kind of middle and sometimes even higher income. It depends on what kind of housing we're talking about. So when it comes to renter housing need, the vast majority of it is single working people between 35 and 65 or 35 and 64 years old. That's 141. Is the current need there. And there's also a need for 61 middle and higher income rental units. So it's not just, low and moderate income households. When we look at owners, it's a little different in terms of who's low and moderate income, but in that kind of segment, It's actually because the home ownership rate is so much higher among older householders than it is among younger. That's where the vast majority of need lies. So we're looking at 53 single people and 40 married couples in the older age category. And then that goes up into the middle and higher income categories as well, but primarily single people and married couples, because most families over 65 don't have dependents in the home. So the other thing that was done was there was a walking and windshield survey done in non-HOA neighborhoods in Clarkdale. And so we identified 32 homes in those 3 neighborhoods that would benefit from some kind of repair, including lot cleanups and, those kind of beautification sorts of things. And then 27 that would benefit from either major repairs or replacement because they had deteriorated to that point where replacement is probably the best solution. So when I look at that, I say, what can we reasonably do, right? Here's our current need. We know we're going to continue to grow absent some, total economic downturn or something else that causes people to stop coming here. So I say, what kind of goals can we reasonably set? And so these are just kind of, my suggestions on what's reasonable. So if we look at meeting 50% of that need among single person, low and moderate income households, that would be 71 bedroom rental homes. And those rental homes would go for around $600 a month. So that's a fairly low rent. Could you say, let's do 2 bedrooms? And people will double up. People will definitely have roommates, especially if it's newer and efficient housing in a good location. That's always a possible option. But in addition to thinking about apartments, you've got to think about things like accessory dwelling units, tiny homes, park models, RV parks where people can bring in their homes because their RVs are their homes. So, I don't want to think this is apartments. I'm not saying we have to build apartments. I'm saying, we have to think about the breadth of the possibilities. When we look at either rental or ownership homes, so when we start to move into kind of those households who are in the middle and higher income brackets, it's 30 homes renting at $1,500 a month or a purchase price in the low 200s, which again, is very difficult to deliver in today's financial environment. That's apartments, it's manufactured housing, it's possibly some kind of acquisition, rehabilitation, kind of resale type of model, if they're to get some of those units that need repair into the hands of home buyers. And then, I have to say, if it's going to be anything that's site built right now, it almost has to have some kind of, I don't want to say subsidy, but there has to be some kind of investment or some kind of waiver of fees or something else happening in order to bring that cost down to something that is affordable to the people who live and work here. And then I also think it's vitally important to consider that potential demand for downsizing among people who are aging. I know I can speak for myself. I'd love to downsize. If I had someplace to go, I would. And I think I'm not the only person who feels that way. But if you really start to look at, taking the low and moderate income in that age category and some of the middle and higher income, and you say, what if we focus on 50% of, this small segment of people? That's 175 homes. Now it sounds like a lot, but remember, we're talking at build out, we're talking 1,000 more homes. So it's not that significant of a portion, but you're actually talking about everything from $200,000 homes all the way up into the 400,000s for people who are downsizing, because we're looking at all income categories, not just those at the lowest level, because some people will stay in their homes no matter what. And then, of course, there's the neighborhood preservation, and that's about implementing a rehousing rehabilitation assistance. It's about making sure there's those routine neighborhood cleanups that I know you periodically do in some of your neighborhoods. And really setting a goal of let's substantially repair or replace half of those homes that need it. That's 13 homes. This is over, a 10-year period. So, thinking long-term, these are my suggestions. I think they're, I want you to kind of mull this over, but it's not like grasping at, we're going to address all of the need, because it's not appropriate, nor is it reasonable or financially feasible. So. And then I want to talk a little bit about action. So, when I say, here's our goals for these units. So I categorize actions, and you'll see this when I come out with, some a little more in-depth in the strategies, into kind of 3 categories. One of those is assistance to households. That's things like down payment assistance, counseling, financial and credit counseling, home buyer counseling, those sorts of things, along with like non-housing things like childcare, transit, stuff that makes life easier, especially for working families. I am not suggesting, other than housing rehabilitation, in any way, shape, or form, that the town actually implement those types of programs. There are resources out there, and it's really a matter of helping people understand what's there and connecting them with those resources. So I think, that's like the low hanging fruit, if you will, is knowing what those resources are and making sure people know how to access them. The second is kind of innovative financing and ownership models. And this is really looking at how do we create local financing mechanisms, because it's very difficult to extract money from the financial markets right now. So, how do we create loan pools? How do we work with banks to participate in loans? And the other part of that is really looking at other models, like leasing municipal land in order to take the land out of the equation and allow for housing to be constructed at a lower cost. And of course, that cost savings is passed on. That's one model. And then the other model is a community land trust model, which is very similar, except for the community land trust is generally held in a nonprofit status. Those are very successful models, and they're already being discussed regionally. So, and then finally is, I think yes, I'm sorry, Laura.
Is this where sort of like LIHTC funding and stuff would also land in this pool or this bucket or this?
When I think about things so when I'm talking about actions, I'm talking about things that the town or its partners might do. So certainly if a developer comes in and wants to access LIHTC resources, and you're able to, let's just say the town ponies up with some land on a long-term land lease, that just makes that LIHTC application that much sweeter. And that much more likely to be funded. But I would not say like you want to promote a certain kind of, financing, because there's lots of mechanisms out there. And that's just the most popular right now.
Will we come out of this study with a understanding of what those are, or is that not part of the?
Yeah.
You mean what all of the different financing mechanism are?
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
I don't know about all of them, but I do. But I do have, it's, it's already in the works.
I know I know you don't know all of them, but I get.
Well, I probably know,
It would be
90%.
nice to come
Yes.
out with an education about what those kind of options are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there is so the action plan will look at potential partnerships, strategic partnerships, as well as here's some of the resources that could be brought to bear, along with, in this day and age, we just hyperlink to, a website that explains everything to us, right?
Okay.
So, yeah, so that'll be there like in a table or grid type of format, so that you can, research whatever you'd like to research. Absolutely, yes. You're welcome. All right, and then probably everybody's, kind of least favored, set of actions are these kind of support for development actions, which are code-related actions, zoning-related actions. If you're going to have other types of housing other than large lot, single-family housing, there's going to have to be rezoning, and either proactive rezoning through a general planning process and kind of revisiting existing zoning or some code changes. And so some of the things, and in addition to that, there's also things that the town can do like waive fees, reduce fees, expedite permitting processes, I think one of the things that we forget about when we think about housing is bringing infrastructure to a site in order to reduce that extension cost to the actual developer. I think that's also, something else you can think of. And there's some, new, not new, but some old new financing mechanisms that have kind of been brought out given the environment. So there's access to low cost financing and grants for those kinds of things. And, so I think if you're targeted and you know where you want to go with it, and you have a developer who wants to deliver product that, you're saying you need, that's, also something else that you can be doing. And then I think the other thing is I've been talking to a lot of developers over just the last couple of months. I've been in this business for over 30 years, and I know, I've never quite seen it this challenging, to be honest with you. Costs are very high. It's a difficult market for older people because of capital gains and all these other situations that are, going on. And it's hard to bring down the cost of housing because you can't develop it at a low enough cost without significant other investment. And people can't afford to let go of their homes right now. So, it's very, very challenging. And then couple that with wages that have not really been increasing, at all to keep pace with the cost of housing. And you kind of have a perfect storm. So I think the other piece of that is really looking at things like allowing HUD code manufactured housing by right in any single family district, allowing for different, kind of alternative types of building materials as long as they meet building code to be brought in, and kind of re-envisioning the community in some of those ways. So those are hard things because those are the things that make people uncomfortable. That's the kind of change that it makes us all uncomfortable. So and then finally, I just wanted to share the timeline for kind of where we're at. And so we've got the preliminary strategic initiatives that I'm working on right now. They'll come out over the next couple of months. We'll integrate the survey into finalizing the posters and kind of the other outreach pieces. That'll all kind of be packaged into here's where we think we're going with these strategic initiatives. Residents, like, where are you at now when you see like what that really means? And then the zoning code will be, I believe, coming before the public in October through December. And then January, February, we will be the draft action plan. Everything will kind of be ready for public consumption. And then as soon as that's done, I'll be back with you to talk about it and then hopefully get everything adopted. There's a couple working group meetings in there, one at the beginning of October to kind of go back over the community outreach initiative part of it. And then we'll meet again in January to talk about the action plan itself and what we can support and not support. So a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. Are there any questions for Martina? I've got just a couple.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Martina, I did not see in your presentation, so I don't know if you explored this or not. So it's kind of a two-part question. First of all, the impact of short-term rentals on the housing market. What did you find? And have you seen any movement of short-term rentals converting to long-term rentals in the last
I
year
did
or
not
so?
look at short-term rentals because I think that everybody has kind of, placed a lot of attention on short-term rentals, but I did look at that proportion of properties that is second and investment homes, and that's going to include short-term rentals, but I did not try to devise, which ones of these are short-term versus long-term, or any of that kind of, what's going to convert. I just assumed that, they're not for primary use. So,
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Martina?
I guess I'm just gonna ask for the 15th time, I feel like. Can we get a map? Can we get a historical, as part of this, can we get a historical map of what has happened to housing in Clarkdale? Like how has Clarkdale developed over the last 50 years, or 100 years?
Yep.
As the case may be, and when was the original town center built? And then when was this neighborhood built and that neighborhood? Just to get a sense of actually where we've come from. Because I think that that's just an important thing for us to know.
yeah. Yeah, Gus was putting something together, but I will follow up with him. Yes, yeah, it's in our notes. We've already talked about it, so, yeah.
I guess one of the areas, especially in this support for development under the 3 categories for action, I know that the zoning code committee is working right now on some of this. And yet we don't have the completion of this. So like the one item in here where you talk manufactured modular in single family zones by right, we're looking at it as sort of separate zoning in the work that we're doing. So we haven't really had an opportunity to talk about that at our zoning meetings of how, what is manufactured modular homes, housing in particular, and how can that fit in a single family zoning area? Because people get a little wonky around that. So I think there's a whole education stuff. So I'm concerned that we're moving on this other track maybe too fast when we don't have enough of this information into the zoning code update that is going on at the same time, and we're not having an opportunity to really explore that.
Correct. Yeah, so this is information that I'm sharing.
Sure.
Just because it's just kind of all, been coming
Sure.
together. So I'm sharing it here. Hopefully it can get integrated further into those conversations because I think it is typically, it is typically separated. There are multiple examples of communities. Kingman comes to mind at the top of mind that have been doing this for years, have been allowing this. But there is also, they also ask for things like stoops, it's not your just straight
Sure.
front,
Sure.
we expect a garage, we expect, a patio. So there's, so you can almost end up with a very custom looking home compared to what you might otherwise get. So they're one example, and I think it's Safford
Okay.
also does, so.
So I guess that's my question, not just for you, because it's right here. It's something we should consider. I guess, is Ruth still here? Yeah, Ruth, how can we integrate this with what we're doing over on in the zoning committee? Because we're kind of like moving really fast on that. And yet this is really good information that we need to consider as a part of that.
So for the Citizens Advisory Committee, we have been taking the zoning code and the chapters out of order for just
Okay.
this reason, because we didn't want to tackle a lot of the things more oriented towards development, subdivisions, and zoning districts until Martina had a chance to work through all of this information. So she's actually given a presentation on this to the Citizens Advisory Committee. Was it last month? I think it was.
Yeah, we didn't talk
We didn't
about
talk
this
about the
as part of
solution.
that, so.
Right, that
yeah.
we did not talk about, but that is something that we'll certainly have her back to talk about with that group, especially now that we're going to be talking about the zoning districts where this will really actually have an effect. So we're moving into chapter 3, and that is where it's really going to have an effect, where we're really going to have to take a look at what each zoning district, especially the residential, allows by right, and where we could possibly expand these other forms of housing, talk about density, and all of those things. And we can tie some of them to things like building affordable housing.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
there's a whole list of things. We've just kind of just started to hit that convergence point of where now the zoning code will be talking to the housing and needs analysis to see how do we use the zoning code to rectify what we need to address in the housing needs analysis.
Okay, so I know we have that up, and I know Town Manager Guthrie wants to say something, but we have that up like we're meeting this week. So
Mhm.
that's just the beginning of the discussion.
That's just the
Okay,
beginning.
it wasn't clear to me in that agenda.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that's why I'm bringing it up, because this is really an important part of why we started the update of the zoning code, is that we wanted to look very seriously at housing opportunities.
Right,
So
and-
that we could consider all of that. So I'm just trying to understand process at this time.
Got it. Yep. No, I get it.
Right, Susan?
So, I'm going to share your concerns. And I do think that this warrants some discussion about the timing of each of these procedures, and these projects. And I mean, Charity and I just had a conversation today because the citizen, I'm sorry, gathering my thoughts. The citizen committee is going to be looking at several chapters on Thursday. And I think the intent was to turn around and bring them to P and Z the next week for just looking at them. So I do feel a little bit like, and some of it might be because of our contracts with our consultants, but I think we need to look a little bit about possibly slowing our roll a little bit just to make sure that we're catching up with each other. Because I had some concerns about turning that quickly, because it wasn't going to give P and Z very much time to go through everything and really absorb it before, but we weren't asking them to vote on it either. So I do think you bring up a wonderful point that I think we might really want to look at both of these processes, how they integrate, and are we moving too quickly?
On one versus the other before we get some real information. I mean, that's kind of my concern as I look at what Martina has put forward as what looks to be recommendations coming out of this. I know we have some more community work to do and stuff, but we've got an opportunity with this other group sitting there to start really looking at these very seriously and get input from the community at the same time. So I would really like the two of them to be more in sync so that we don't rush one and miss an opportunity.
Right. So that is why we're taking them all to Planning Commission as well as an extra step to provide additional opportunity for public comment and for discussion, because the Planning Commission ultimately will have to make a recommendation on the text amendments to council. And the worst possible way to proceed with that is to dump all 13 chapters on them all at once. So that's why we wanted to bring them together so that the Planning Commission can start chewing through some of their information. With respect to the chapter 3, which is where all these zoning districts are set out, I don't have no delusion of getting all through any of that in one meeting. It will take us several meetings to really sit down and think about what these districts represent, what they require, what they could potentially do, and then start talking about language. So
Okay.
we.
So, but is that going to be, I just want to clarify, is that going to be at the zoning working group? Because I don't know if, I think the zoning working group has to bring those recommendations forward for discussion with planning. Not
Correct.
that they shouldn't be aware of it, I'm not saying that, but I want to make sure that that group has plenty of time to talk about this so we can start coming up with something that's got some real meat on it. And it's just not a review of terms here and there. And we go, oh yeah, good, good. But we haven't really sat down and integrated some of these ideas into that discussion.
Well, we can certainly talk about that on the 11th.
Okay.
Sure, go ahead.
So these are solutions that came to the forefront.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that, it doesn't mean I would not recommend that you do them all, but,
No.
but I think that they will be feeding into that. And I think the code committee is going to have to say, what are we comfortable with, which zones? And it is that, that's the big part of the code rewrite. So actually, from my perspective, the timing is actually really good.
Okay.
Because I'm saying, hey, here's things that you should be considering as you're going through this, as you start this conversation. So, yeah.
Okay.
So just to allay, your concerns, from my perspective, it's good. So, yeah.
Let us kind of have an internal discussion, if you don't mind, about
Sure.
how is this working? And I'm going to be at the Thursday meeting, and maybe we can bring some of this up during that meeting just to talk about what does this timeline look like and how are we integrating the two things and just making sure everybody's comfortable and that we're not missing opportunities. So I really like your idea and I think it's great advice, and let us just regroup a little bit and Ruth and I will meet just to make sure that we're comfortable, that we're not missing an opportunity.
Yeah, I just don't want us to, we've spent a lot of time and effort doing both of these. And so I want to make sure there's value to everything that we're doing. This is a huge step for Clarkdale and I know other communities are doing it, but I'm just talking about Clarkdale,
Yeah.
to really look at how we grow for the future and what opportunities, what kind of community are we going to look like, and get as much input and involvement in this. And we've, asked a number of people to be a part of both the housing group and the zoning group. That will eventually all of that go through planning and then to, back up to us. But we want also the community to weigh in. And I think the clarity of what we put out there is going to be very important.
And we also have the complexity of all the new laws that were
Yeah.
passed this session. Yeah, and
Yeah.
Ruth and I have been meeting about how are we going to do that in the middle of a code
I
update.
gotcha.
So we're working through that with our attorney as well, but it does really complicate. 'Cause you
Yes,
have
I know
track
it
changes on top of track changes on top of track changes.
And I understand the complexity of all the new laws also coming into play here, but how can we make this work for us, and get to some of these answers and put a direction out there for us? Yeah.
Thank you for that. And the survey that is out now does show like manufactured housing, this would work for me in my neighborhood, but, or maybe not in my neighborhood, but someplace else in Clarkdale, this kind of housing would work. So I think, we are already kind of asking the public what they think. And then I think it will come down to, are we going to do this? Is this a direction that we
Yeah,
want to take? And
absolutely.
then that's the hard
Yeah.
part, right? So, yeah.
Well, that's hard work, but if we have information, good information sharing and understanding and a real discussion around all of this, the hard work, as we know in this town, we always get through the hard work. It's, how hard can it be? We'll get there.
Yeah.
I don't know what the outcomes are going to be. I just want to make sure that we're exploring all of them and seeing, I think everybody gets that.
Yeah, and I don't want to propose anything that your residents, would be
Sure.
against.
Absolutely.
It doesn't make sense to do that. So, yeah.
Is there any further questions for Martina? Okay, I'm not hearing any. Thank you. Thank you very much for doing this presentation. that's a wonderful presentation out there of the boards. It gives us a lot of information that we haven't seen before. I think Lisa has a comment.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It
That's
just occurred
okay.
to me. While I was looking at those boards, a member of our planning and zoning asked if the slides would be available so that they can see them in their committee.
Oh, the boards themselves, the
Yes.
boards stay with you. So if, if you wanted to keep them, out for the committee when they meet, they're on 11 by 17 paper. So, it gets kind of, hard to look at, unless somebody wants to kind of columnar it. But all of this information is out of the actual housing needs assessment document that was drafted. Although there was something I had to fix in there because some chart went kaflooey, but that's fixed now. So this is all actually in that original document. It's just kind of key stuff pulled out.
And I'm sorry for
It's
not
okay.
asking it earlier.
That's okay.
Yeah, no, that's,
no,
no, I
that's
understand.
fine.
Yeah, yeah.
I think we want to make sure for those who want to read all of this, that it's available, and maybe we just make sure it's highlighted in everything we put out. If you want more information here, you're welcome to read it.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, so these will stay here with you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Martina? Thank you so much for all of this.
So-
Okay, let's move on to item 6B, which is the national opioid settlement. This is to discuss, consider, and act upon a request to participate in the secondary manufacturers settlement with 8 opioid manufacturers. And I will let Town Manager Guthrie to speak to this topic.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. These should be old hat to you by now because we've had several recently. Unfortunately, we do have to bring each one back to you for approval and authorization for me to sign the document that says, yes, we want to enter into this agreement. This is not actually disbursement. This is just us giving notice that, yes, we want to be part of the action. So I highly recommend that you authorize me to sign the documents indicating our willingness to participate. And as the mayor knows, we are periodically getting checks. She knows because they come to her and then she
They come
brings
to
them
me.
to us. But I mean, we've been able to do some meaningful work in the community with those funds. So we'd like
Right.
to continue to do that.
I think, in fact, yesterday, I opened up one of the envelopes that came, and there was close to $8,000 in 2 checks on previous settlements. So the checks are starting to come in on a regular basis. So any questions for Town Manager Guthrie on this? No. If not, I'll take a motion.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve the request to participate in the secondary manufacturers settlements with 8 opioid manufacturers as part, thank you, as part of the national opioid settlement, and authorize the town manager to execute all documents necessary to join the settlement.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember O'Neill and seconded by Councilmember Jones to participate in the secondary manufacturers settlements with 8 opioid manufacturers as presented. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carried. Thank you very much. Okay, item 7 is future agenda items. Town Clerk Charity Brooks has brought forward several of the items coming up over the next couple, about 2-3 meetings. Is there anything that is missing on the agendas that you would like to have added? Okay, I'm seeing nobody and say, yes, we need something else, so I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
Is there a second? It's been moved by Vice Mayor Hunsetter, seconded by Councilmember Jones to adjourn the meeting at 7:04 PM. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, motion carried. We are adjourned. Thank you so very much.